Have you ever looked in the mirror and had the strange feeling that what was there wasn't exactly you? I'm not talking about a quick glance or a moment of tiredness. I'm talking about that deep, uncomfortable feeling, as if there's something or someone behind the glass, watching, mirroring, but not imitating, something that seems to understand more about you than you do. Have you ever experienced this? I thought it was all in my head, a reflection of stress, broken sleep, and time on the road. But everything changed when I decided to stop for the night at a small highway motel, lost in the middle of a stretch of Route 66. It was the kind of place that seemed frozen in time, faded facade, dim lights, a neon sign that flickered a sickly red. It looked abandoned, but the receptionist greeted me as if she'd already been expecting me. The room was simple, a double bed with a soft mattress, a tube TV leaning against the wall, and a faint, musty smell, like old paper stored too long. But what caught my attention most was the mirror. It was enormous. It took up almost the entire wall opposite the bed, with an antique dark frame full of carved details, almost like intertwining roots. There were a few subtle cracks running through the glass like veins. At the time, I just thought it was curious, but something there was already bothering me, without me knowing why. The first night I thought it was fatigue. I stared at my reflection for a while, just out of habit, half hypnotized, and I swear for a second the image flickered a little after me, subtle, almost imperceptible. I shook my head, laughing at myself. I'd been driving all day. Maybe I was just imagining it. But even so, that feeling clung to me, like a presence, like someone was living there, on the other side, copying me, watching me, waiting for something. For the next few hours, every movement in front of the mirror felt tense. I moved and waited for him to follow, as if at any moment he would make a mistake, as if he were testing the boundaries between what was real and what was just an image. Have you ever had that feeling, that maybe you're not the original, but the copy? The truth is, as the hours passed, I no longer knew if that reflection was mine, or if it was a version of me I didn't want to encounter. And worst of all, I had the feeling he knew it, as if he was aware that I was starting to suspect, and that he liked it. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you, and maybe it will make you look at yourself in the mirror differently tonight, because in that cheap room, in the middle of nowhere, in the noisy solitude of a forgotten road, I lost more than sleep. I lost more than sleep, because that night and the ones that followed, I began to lose something harder to explain, a sense of presence, of who I was. Every time I looked in that mirror, I felt as if I were being studied, dismantled, rebuilt, as if some invisible force was slowly trying to replace me from the inside out. And the most disturbing thing was that no one else seemed to notice. Not the motel receptionist, not the man at the gas station where I stopped the next day. They looked at me as if I were normal, but I knew something was wrong. Something inside me was off. It's strange trying to describe this out loud, but maybe you felt something similar, a kind of glitch in the mirror, a pause that lasts a second too long, a chill without cause, as if someone was staring at you from behind. If this has ever happened to you, comment below. Seriously, I want to know if this strange sensation has ever happened to anyone else, or if it's just me. And if this story has you hooked so far, please leave a like, because that's what shows me it's worth continuing to bring these stories. And if you enjoy this kind of experience, where terror lives in the details, in the silence, in the things we feel but can't explain, subscribe to the channel. This is where these stories find a voice, and it's your presence that transforms all of this into a real community, where every comment, every click makes a difference. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content. It's what keeps this project alive, fueling stories like this that sometimes seem too crazy to be told anywhere else. But as I was saying, the mirror wasn't just a mirror, it was a window. And over time, I realized it wasn't me looking anymore. At first I tried to rationalize everything. I attributed the delayed reflection to the room's poor lighting, perhaps some strange trick caused by the cracks in the glass. A misperception, nothing more. I was exhausted from the road, my eyelids heavy and my muscles tense from hours behind the wheel. I convinced myself that a good shower and a few hours of sleep would solve the problem, but something wouldn't let me. The first time I noticed the mismatch, I was brushing my teeth. I looked up reflexively and saw myself there, frozen, static. For a second, she didn't follow the movement of my arm, and then, as if she'd remembered the choreography, she moved. Only too late. 1,000th too late. The kind of thing we notice more with our stomachs than with our eyes. I felt a shiver at the base of my neck, but I laughed at myself. I said out loud, "You're tripping, man." Still, the feeling lingered, as if a part of the room had touched me and left a residue. And the worst part was, it wasn't just the mirror, there was a hum, a barely perceptible sound, as if coming from within the walls, like a distant generator mixed with the sound of my own thoughts. It felt like the entire room was breathing, not with noise, but with pressure. That night, I slept little. The bed was too soft, the sheets scratchy, and I woke from time to time with the feeling that someone had just left the room. You know when the air feels still, warm, as if a body had just moved away. It was like that. I looked around, everything silent, but the mirror called to me. I woke to sunlight filtering through the cracks in the cheap curtains. I got up slowly, trying to convince myself it was all just a sequence of random sensations. I stood in front of the mirror again, as if facing an opponent. I observed every detail of my face, the scruffy beard, the sunken eyes, the hunched shoulders, and it returned it all to me, perfectly. Only again, with a slight delay, nothing glaring, but it was there. I decided to go out, to get a coffee, clear my head, reconnect with reality. I went to reception, where the woman with the slurred voice and glazed eyes asked me if I'd settled into the room yet. The question pierced me. I laughed, a little embarrassed, as if I hadn't understood. She didn't smile. She just continued to stare at me, her eyes too fixed, as if she knew something I didn't. I returned to the room with a weight on my chest that I couldn't name. The mirror seemed bigger. It was as if it had expanded while I was gone, and I noticed a new crack right in the left corner. Thin, delicate, but definitely not there before. I moved closer to take a better look, and it was then that I noticed another detail. My reflection was staring back at me, but its eyes seemed darker than mine. It wasn't just the delay, it was the look, as if the reflection was waiting for something, as if it knew I would return, and more than that, as if it had remained conscious the entire time. It wasn't a mirror, it was a window. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what began as an almost imperceptible detail became a sequence of events that shook everything I believed to be real. And the truth is, there are hidden corners of our own minds that we rarely access, unless something on the other side decides to open the door first. Comment below. This makes sense to me. If at some point in your life you too have had the strange feeling of looking at something that wasn't just reflecting you, the next morning something seemed distorted. Light filtered into the room through the same frayed curtain, but there was a chilliness to the room that wasn't coming from the weather. It was as if the space were quieter than it should have been, as if the air were holding its breath. I approached the mirror, almost without thinking, like someone repeating a ritual. I wanted to check, see if there was still any trace of what. Until then, I'd insisted on calling an illusion. I slowly raised my right arm, keeping my eyes fixed on my reflection. It followed me, but with a delay. A more evident, more deliberate delay. It was as if the reflex had waited for me to finish the gesture before beginning its own, as if it wasn't imitating me, but deciding for itself the right moment to react. My fingers trembled in the air. It repeated the tremor only a second later, and it wasn't a tremor of insecurity. It was a controlled, purposeful tremor, as if to say, "I'm here, I know what I'm doing." I stood there, staring at what should have been just my own reflection, but it wasn't. It was something more, an observer, a simulator, a mirror that no longer reflected accurately, but with intention. The day before, everything could still be explained away by tiredness. Not now. This wasn't a mistake. It was a manifestation. I began to test. I turned my face sharply to the left. The reflection didn't follow. It stared at me. That stopped me inside. It was as if it knew I was testing its limits, as if it wanted me to notice. I felt a lump in my throat. I looked at myself again, closer this time, pressing my face against the cold glass. And then I saw it. The reflection's eyes were darker, not because of the shadow. It was something in the irises, deeper, almost oily, as if that other me were in a darker place than this room, as if the reflection wasn't a reflection at all, but a presence. And it knocked me back. I took 2 steps back, gasping, feeling as if I'd broken through an invisible barrier. I tried to convince myself that it could all still be psychological, a perceptual dysfunction, an isolated outburst. I spent the day avoiding looking in the mirror, like someone avoiding an old enemy. I spent hours in the motel parking lot, watching the trucks cruising along the highway, listening to the sounds of real life outside. But even there, under the pale sun and the smell of gasoline, I felt as if something were watching me from the bedroom window. The mirror wouldn't let me go. I returned as the sun began to set, determined to face whatever it was. I entered slowly, turned on the light, and there it was, the glass. The dark frame seemed even more twisted. I approached slowly and stared at it again. My reflection was there, still, waiting for me. I cautiously raised my hand. He did too. Only this time he didn't just repeat the gesture, he smiled as he did it. A subtle, lopsided smile. I didn't smile, and it broke something inside me, because that smile seemed to know. He was aware, not just of me, but of himself. As if the thing inside the mirror had its own identity. That night, I tried to sleep with the light on. The television blared an old show I couldn't even pay attention to. The hum returned, deeper, deeper, as if vibrating deep within my bones. I curled up on my side in bed, avoiding looking at the mirrored wall, but I knew it was there. I knew it was, watching me. And at one point, I heard a crack. A dull crack, coming from the glass. I didn't move. I just squeezed my eyes shut, hoping it was the wind, the ancient structure, something. But the truth is, deep inside I already knew. It was moving even when I couldn't see it. In the middle of the night, I woke up in a cold sweat. I dreamed about the mirror, but what woke me wasn't the dream. It was the sound of a scraping sound, like nails sliding across glass. I sat up in bed, my chest tight, and slowly looked at the wall. Nothing, but the mirror seemed cleaner, as if someone had wiped it away, erasing marks. I got up, walked over to it, and it was then that I felt something cold approach the back of my neck. I turned around in fright. Nothing. I stared back at my reflection. This time, it seemed perfectly synchronized. My every movement was precisely mirrored. But there was a tension in the air, a density, as if I were playing a game whose purpose I didn't understand, as if it were waiting for me to let my guard down. I ran my fingers along the frame, trying to find any new cracks. That's when I felt something strange, a small indentation beneath the wood, as if someone had scratched a word there. I rubbed the surface until I could decipher it. 4 letters, letters in English, live. The problem was, they weren't in my frame. They were in the reflection, only in the reflection. I looked at the real wood, nothing, smooth, unmarked. But in the mirror, the letters were there, vivid, clear, as if they were a warning or a reminder, as if it were telling me, you're still alive, but so am I. I felt a strange weight on my spine, as if something inside me was beginning to detach. A subtle sensation, as if my consciousness were being pulled out of my own body inch by inch. It was like being watched from within. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. because the question was no longer about what I saw. It was about what saw back at me. And when you feel yourself being seen by something hidden within your own image, the transformation has already begun. Because there are times when it's not you looking in the mirror, it's the mirror looking back at you, waiting for the right moment to cross over. Write in the comments, "I saw in the mirror," if you ever had that strange feeling that you were not alone, even though you were completely alone. That morning, the mirror was no longer the center of my anguish. It was what the mirror had done to me. It wasn't about seeing something wrong. It was about feeling wrong, about realizing there was an invisible break between what I thought was real and what presented itself as truth before my eyes. I began to notice small lapses in time, like cuts in my line of consciousness. I was in the bathroom, and suddenly I was sitting on the edge of the bed, unable to remember how I got there. Objects around me seemed to move subtly. Things I swore I'd left on the table appeared on the floor. The digital clock blinked at times that made no sense, and the buzzing, previously discreet, now pulsed like a vibration that spread throughout my entire body, as if it were part of the room's architecture. I tried to rest, to close my eyes and switch off for a few hours, but every time my eyelids grew heavy, images formed like fragments stolen from a hidden camera. I could see the room, yes, but from angles that couldn't possibly be mine, as if someone were watching me while I slept, or worse, as if I were the observer, but from outside myself. I began to wonder if I was still the original, because that mirror thing, that other me, it seemed clearer, more present, more real. The feeling of being watched took on physical proportions. I felt the gaze on my back. Even in the bathroom, with the door closed, it was as if the mirrors had multiplied, even if invisible. I avoided seeing my reflection even in darkened screens. The window pane, the silver surface of the faucet, everything seemed to contain the possibility of being a portal, as if each reflection held a version of me waiting for the right moment to take my place. There was a moment when I spent minutes, maybe hours, staring at my own reflection without realizing it. I only realized it when I noticed my face pressed against the glass, my hands trembling, and my eyes welling up. I don't remember getting closer. I don't remember putting myself in that position. It was as if the other had guided me, drawn me in, and the hidden truth that revealed itself there in that moment was unbearable. I was no longer my own master. I was part of an experiment I hadn't authorized. Paranoia seeped into the details. The room phone rang once, just once, a short ring. When I answered, there was silence, but I heard breathing, low, almost imperceptible, as if someone were there, on the other end of the line, studying me. After that, I began to hear whispers as the buzzing intensified, disjointed words, as if an unknown language was trying to penetrate the barriers of my mind. I tried to leave the room, literally, but the doorknob felt too cold, almost painful to the touch. The hallway seemed longer than before. The reception area was empty, despite having heard footsteps outside moments earlier. I went back, because part of me no longer knew if there was an outside. It was as if that room, that mirror, had become a living organism, and I was now just another organ, incapable of functioning outside of it. The nights lost their cycle. I no longer knew what time it was. The digital clock on the nightstand rotated its numbers erratically, as if mocking the linearity of time. And the reflection, he smiled more often now. Sometimes I saw him chuckle discreetly, even when he wasn't facing the mirror, as if he saw through the side of my eye, as if he were observing me from within. My hands were shaking. My face began to look strange to me, as if I no longer recognized my own features. I tried to take a selfie to record my state, and when I looked at the image, the eyes weren't mine. There was something behind it, a second pair of eyes. I immediately deleted the photo, but it kept coming back, even after deletion. It appeared as a suggestion in the gallery, and one time I noticed that my reflection in the photo was smiling, while I was crying. The disconnection deepened until it reached what I would call my soul, if that still made sense. It was no longer about fear, it was about loss. Loss of internal structure, of the axis. The journey that began with a sleepless night in a cheap motel now became a spiraling descent toward a place where what we call identity no longer has value. Was I the reflection? Was I the original? Or were we both trying to occupy the same body, the same existence? The walls of the room seemed to move closer sometimes, other times farther apart. As if breathing, I began to see traces of myself written in the fogged mirror, phrases I'd never said, but which sounded familiar. You didn't come back. You're on the wrong side. There's still time. But time for what? To prevent the replacement, or to accept it? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what I understood there, trapped within that fragmented reality, is that the mirror wasn't the problem. The mirror was the messenger, and what it brought was the warning that the transformation was already underway. A change from the inside out, a silent inversion where the mind breaks, and the body keeps moving, only by a different will. Comment below, I've felt this before. If at any point in your life you also questioned who was in control, and if it was really you who was looking through your own eyes. On the third night, I woke with a tight chest, and the sensation that someone had touched me. Not a sudden start, but that slow, suffocating restlessness of someone waking from a dream with no memory, but with remnants of it still on their body. I sat on the edge of the bed, the sheets tangled around my legs and my forehead sweaty. I instinctively ran my hand over my arm, and that's when I felt it. 3 parallel marks, like old scratches right on my left shoulder. They hadn't been there before. They hadn't been there the night before. They hadn't been there when I'd taken off my shirt to sleep. And now they were there. I ran to the mirror. The reflection was there, still in the dark, watching me with a calm that wasn't my own. I raised my arm. The reflection followed suit. But there was something different about the imitation, a surgical precision, as if it knew exactly what to do. I leaned over to better examine the marks, and the reflection did the same, only with a slight anticipation, as if it wanted to show me what I hadn't yet seen. And then I realized the reflection's marks weren't the same as mine. They were deeper, almost open, as if it were further along in the process than I was. I went back to bed with my mind in a scramble. It was dawn, and the room seemed to breathe more heavily. The walls were sweaty, literally. Old wallpaper exuded moisture, and the air was thick, as if I were locked in a sealed chamber. The buzzing, that low sound vibrating somewhere between my ear and the back of my neck, now had a rhythm, a pattern, almost like a Morse code message beating against my skull, begging to be deciphered. I lay on my side, trying to ignore it, but then the sound came. And this time, it wasn't the buzzing. It was a voice, my voice. Coming from inside the mirror, it was calling me, not a whisper or a muffled noise. It was clear, articulate, and what it said was worse than any scream. It called my name in the exact tone I use when I talk to myself in my head. It said things I'd never said out loud, things I'd once thought and hidden, memories I didn't even want to access, as if that reflection was searching my innermost layers. I jumped up, trembling. I grabbed my phone and decided to film. I wanted proof, something to tell me, you're not going crazy. I positioned the camera in front of the mirror and sat on the bed facing away. I let the video record for a few minutes. The room was completely silent, except for that deep rhythm in the background and the faint creaking of the walls, which seemed to be trying to contract. When I stopped recording and went to watch, my body froze. What appeared on the screen wasn't what I expected. The video showed the bedroom. Yes, the bed, yes. But I was there, asleep, deeply, as if I'd never gotten up, as if the one who'd gone to the mirror, made the recording, heard the voice, wasn't the same body that was sleeping. And worst of all, in the background, the reflection in the mirror smiled, staring at me, with eyes open and fixed on the lens, as if it knew the whole time it was being filmed. I threw the phone away. It fell to the floor, screen side down, but I couldn't bring myself to pick it up for a long time. I stood there staring at the mirror. Now it seemed bigger, wider, as if it had grown discreetly, inch by inch, taking up more space on the wall, dominating the room like a living presence. It was no longer an object. It was a crack, a gap between worlds. The cracks in the surface were different too. Now they formed patterns, symbols, or maybe they were just impressions of my collapsing mind, trying to make sense of random shapes. But it was impossible not to notice that the lines connected like the roots of a tree growing inward, not outward. That night I tried to sleep with a chair propped against the door, not because someone might come in, but because I needed some sense of control, any kind. I slept with the light on, but even so, I was swallowed by the same dream. Me in front of the mirror, but this time there were two reflections, one still, as always, the other moved before me, with autonomy, with personality, with intention. I woke up gasping for breath, and when I looked in the mirror upon awakening, I felt as if I'd lost something during my sleep, as if part of my memory had been copied, extracted. I couldn't remember brushing my teeth or putting on the clothes I was wearing. My reflection seemed to know more about me than I did at that moment. And the idea of being gradually replaced from the inside out stopped being a theory. It became a physical sensation, a growing emptiness, as if I were being emptied from within and filled with something different. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because all of this has made me understand something I never thought I'd need to confront. Sometimes what observes us doesn't want to imitate us. It wants to replace us. And perhaps the function of the reflex is just that, to accustom us to the other's presence until we no longer notice the exchange. Comment, "That makes sense to me," if you've ever felt like you were losing parts of yourself without knowing exactly what was taking their place. I woke up to a strange light invading the room. It was as if the sun were rising from an angle that made no sense. The contours of the room seemed different, as if everything had moved a few inches while I slept. My mouth felt dry, my throat scratchy, and when I tried to get up, my body felt heavy, as if I hadn't moved for days. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when, still lying down, I turned my face to the mirror and saw something that took my brain far too long to process. I was there, standing in front of the mirror, dressed, silent, as if I were getting ready to go out. The same coat I'd left hanging on the chair now draped his shoulders. His shoes were on, and he moved with frightening ease, adjusting his collar, smoothing his hair, leaning forward slightly as if checking the last details before leaving. My heart raced. I was still lying down, still sweaty, still confused, but my reflection was already ready. I sat up abruptly in bed. The movement made the headboard creak, but he didn't react. He didn't look at me. He didn't acknowledge me. He continued his routine, indifferent, methodical, as if I were no longer there. I jumped out of bed, my chest tight, gasping for air, and ran to the bathroom. Nothing. Empty. The mirror over the sink showed only my disoriented, sweaty face, eyes wide with fear. I ran back to the master bedroom, but the reflection, the other one, was already gone. Only my body remained. The bedroom, and a detail that chilled me to the core. The door was ajar. The latch turned as if someone had slipped out. I approached slowly, with small steps, hoping to find a motel employee, some sign of life, some sign of logic. But there was only silence in the hallway, and on the dresser beside the door lay a completed checkout form. My name was there, my name, the date, the day after what I thought was still today, and a signature that was mine, but written in a style I didn't recognize. Too straight, too perfect. The floor seemed to spin for a moment. I sat back down on the bed, trying to gather my thoughts. I couldn't remember signing anything. I didn't even remember leaving the room. Time seemed jumbled, as if events were being edited by someone other than me. And deep down, I began to understand. Control was slipping away, not slowly, but violently, with purpose. I examined the room carefully. Every detail seemed sharper, more artificial, as if it had been reconstructed after my last memory. Things were out of place. The ashtray, once empty, now contained cigarette butts. The plastic cup in the bathroom was stained with lipstick, and most frighteningly, the mirror, now clean, reflected only a portion of the wall. The angle of the bed was no longer visible, as if it had retreated, or worse, chosen what it wanted to show. I grabbed my phone, but there was no connection history, no messages, no new photos. It was as if nothing had happened in the last few days. And yet, my body bore marks. The same marks the reflection had, shown before me. The same clothes he had worn, and which were now thrown on the floor, as if worn by someone who had passed by while I slept. Doubt settled in like an internal fog. What was a dream? What was reality? Where did the illusion end and the substitution begin? I no longer trusted my senses, and the idea that someone or something was living me in my place began to make sense. Frighteningly, painfully, felt. I tried to leave the room again, this time in a hurry. I ran down the motel, stairs without looking back. The reception area was empty. The bell on the counter was covered in dust, as if no one had rung it in months. I knocked on the wood. Nothing. I waited. Nothing. The television in the lobby played an old commercial on a loop, an ad from 1997, the same lines, the same images, spinning like a disguise for the void. I opened the front door, and the world seemed suspended. The sky was cloudy, the sound muffled, as if I were inside a bubble that mimicked reality. Cars passed in the distance, but no sign of people, no human gaze. I turned back, I ran to the bedroom, and when I entered, he was there, in the mirror, sitting on the bed, exactly where I'd been seconds ago. But now, he was the one looking at me in astonishment, as if I were the intruder. I froze. I didn't know whether to move, whether to scream, but he did it first. He stood up, calmly. He stared at me and placed his hand on his chest, just like I did when I felt like I was about to lose my breath. And then he was gone, as if he'd dissolved into the glass itself. I ran to the mirror, touched the surface, cold, smooth, but I felt something pulsing there, like a slow heartbeat, as if the image had merely receded, waiting for the right moment to return. And that's when I realized my hand against the glass was trembling, but the reflection was steady, still, safe. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when you begin to suspect that you're being inhabited by a consciousness other than your own, everything changes. Your decisions, your instincts, your fears. The hidden truth isn't that we're being watched. It's that perhaps we're being rehearsed, replaced from within. Comment below, I'm not alone anymore. If this story in some way reminded you of feelings you've never been able to explain. That morning, I woke with a silent conviction burning within me. I had to get out of there. It no longer mattered whether what was happening was real, psychological, symbolic, or metaphysical. It didn't matter if I was being replaced, tested, or diluted. What mattered was the urgent urge to escape. It was as if my most primal instinct was screaming from within. Run, and run now. I gathered my things automatically, what little I had, wallet, cell phone, car keys. I dressed without looking in the mirror, afraid of seeing what was no longer just a reflection, and I left the room with barely contained haste, as if I expected the floor itself to try to stop me. I crossed the hallway with quick steps and ragged breathing, avoiding looking at any polished surface, avoiding seeing him. The motel parking lot was empty. The morning light was grey, dull, as if it had been edited. Everything seemed too clean, too quiet. But my car was there, exactly where I'd left it. I got in, turned the key, and nothing. A dull click. No starter, no life. I tried again, and again. The battery seemed dead, but the radio came on. and on it, a soft, continuous static, as if it were some kind of underground transmission, a hidden code, a presence trying to infiltrate the sound. I got out of the car and slammed the door, angry, scared, and desperate. I screamed for help. No one answered. I ran to the motel gate and tried to open it, but it dragged as if welded to concrete. When I finally managed to get out the side door, I took the road on foot, and that's when I realized it. The signs were gone. The ones that had once pointed directions were now blank. No inscriptions, no numbers, just worn metal structures like the skeletons of something that had been erased. I kept walking, my feet aching, my eyes watering from the dry wind. For a while the road seemed endless. The surrounding landscape began to repeat patterns. A bent branch, a cracked stone, a barbed wire fence exactly like the one I'd passed minutes before. As if the world was stuck in a loop, or as if someone was saving memory in the scene. I stopped. I turned around, and there was the motel behind me, as if I'd never left, as if my steps had taken me in circles that felt like straight lines. My stomach churned. My mind faltered for a moment, as if an important memory had been ripped away, and the worst part was knowing I had nowhere to go. I came back. Not because I wanted to, but because there was no other alternative. When I opened the bedroom door, he was there, in the mirror, waiting for me, standing, as always. But now there was something different. He was imitating me, yes, but with a slight delay, a calculated delay, as if he were mocking me, as if he were testing my reaction. I slowly raised my left arm, and he did the same, with that crooked smile only he could manage. That smile that was never me. I spoke to him. For the first time I tried, but my voice failed. It came out weak, quiet, as if the sound was stuck in my throat. And in the mirror, he responded, with his lips, soundlessly. But I understood every word, because they were the same as the ones I was thinking, only with a tone that wasn't my own, as if he were using my mind as a microphone. You're not alone here anymore. The words didn't come from his mouth. They came from me, but it wasn't intentional. It was as if my own words were being stolen before I could even speak them, and that was worse than any image. It was confirmation that my autonomy was being undermined. I tried to film, but the camera shook in my hands. The screen went dark with each attempt. The recorded images showed only the empty room, no me, no reflection, nothing, only sound. A continuous whisper, as if someone were breathing too close to the microphone. I closed my eyes. I pressed my temples. When I opened them again, the mirror was closer. Not physically, it was a sensation, a presence pressed against me, as if the glass had advanced toward my body without moving. From then on, time became a blur. I paced the room and sometimes saw myself sitting, or standing, or sleeping, in positions I didn't remember assuming. The bedroom windows showed different views every hour. In one, I saw a field. In another, a crowded parking lot. In another, just darkness. It was as if reality were randomly alternating scenarios, or testing which ones would affect me most. And when the phone rang again, I answered, without thinking. The voice was mine, literally. But it said something I would never say. The door is open. Come in. And at that moment, I heard the doorknob turn. The same one I had locked before. The same one that now opened on its own, revealing only silence. I wanted to run, but my body no longer reacted as it once had. There was a delay between my will and my action, a subtle disconnect between intention and movement. I began to feel like I was living in delay and the reflex in real time, as if the exchange had already begun and I was now just a shadow trying to stay upright. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened there wasn't just an experience. It was a change of structure, of mindset, of identity. And when you realize you no longer control your actions, your words, your decisions, you understand that the worst prison is the one where you still have consciousness, but no longer have control. Write down, I feel this delay, if you have ever noticed that something inside you was acting before you even decided. I woke up sitting up, my elbows resting on my knees, my sweaty palms covering half my face. The cold light in the room flickered in short intervals, as if trying to forcibly keep me awake. When I finally looked up, I realized I was no longer in the room. The carpet beneath my feet was red and dingy. The darkened wooden walls were covered in old framed pictures that looked like they'd been hung haphazardly, and the sound was a low, continuous hiss coming from an old television set tuned to an off-air channel. I was at the motel reception, the same reception area that had previously seemed deserted now engulfed me in its dense atmosphere, as if time within it operated on a different frequency. I tried to understand how I had ended up there. I remembered the last scene in the room, the delayed reflection, the voice on the phone, the doorknob turning, and after that a blackout, the kind of darkness that comes not from sleep, but from replacement. A blank space in memory that indicates something else has temporarily taken over. Behind the counter, a man appeared, or maybe he'd been there all along. Tall, thin, with slicked back hair and eyes too small for his face. He stared at me for a moment too long before speaking. And when he did, his voice didn't seem to fit the room. "You look different today." I stood still. I tried to understand what he meant by that. I opened my mouth to respond, but hesitated. For a moment, I wasn't sure if my voice would come out. When I finally muttered a "what?" he just smiled, a polite but cold smile, mechanical, without real emotion, as if he'd just repeated a line he'd said many times before, the kind of sentence that's more part of a script than a conversation. I struggled to my feet. My legs felt heavy, as if I were coming back from surgery. My entire body throbbed with a sense of dislocation, as if something inside me was still trying to adjust to my shape. I walked slowly to the reception bathroom, pushing the door open with my fingertips, wary of what I would find. The mirror over the sink was clean, extremely clean, more so than it should be. The surface reflected with frightening clarity, no smudges, no cracks, no interference whatsoever. I slowly approached, and there I was, perfect, aligned, no delays, no distortions, but it wasn't comforting. There was something about the image that didn't make sense, something subtle, as if the perfect synchronicity was too performative, as if the reflection were trying hard not to make a mistake. The face looked like mine, but there was too much. Rigidity in the gaze, a gaze that didn't move when the rest of the face smiled. I tested it. I forced a smile. The reflection responded, identical, but cold, icy, lifeless. I touched my face, skin, warmth, everything real, but the feeling was the opposite. My fingers seemed to not recognize what they were touching. It was like placing my hand on an object that was once yours, but now carries a different energy, a different owner. I left the bathroom feeling the air thicken. Each step toward the motel's exit seemed to echo differently, as if my feet were heavier, as if the floor refused to be stepped on. The front door handle felt strangely warm, almost as if I had just been used by someone else, or by myself seconds before. Outside, the parking lot was full again, but the cars were old, models I hadn't seen in decades, and the people, they were there, yes, but no one spoke, no one interacted. They just moved slowly between the vehicles, like pieces on a slow-motion board. And when a woman passed me, her eyes lost somewhere other than here. She turned her head as I passed and froze for a second. She said nothing. She just looked at me as if she recognized something, but couldn't explain her discomfort. Others did the same. They stared at me for fractions of a second, with expressions of doubt, distrust, or slight fear, as if seeing a familiar face in a strange body, as if something in my form was still human, but the content was wrong. I walked up to the car, the same. A car. The paint was intact, but there was something in the reflection in the rear window that immediately made me stop. At first, I thought it was the angle of the light, but as I got closer, My heart froze. There, in the glass, my reflection stared back at me, but with dark eyes. I'm not talking about dark eyes or dilated pupils. They were completely black, as if someone had painted the insides of his eyes with pitch. Dull, lifeless. And yet, he was smiling. Not the fake smile, nor the mechanical one. It was a smile of satisfaction, as if he'd finally gotten what he wanted. I took 2 steps back, my body trembling. I looked around. No one else seemed to notice, but I knew the replacement was complete. Maybe not completely. Maybe there was still something of me trying to resist, but that thing there in the reflection, it was no longer a fragment. It was a presence. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because at that moment, I understood that the process wasn't immediate, it was gradual. A delicate, meticulous infiltration carried out with the care of someone who knows that the human mind breaks in silence. And the hidden truth is that replacement doesn't happen when you disappear, but when you're still there and no one recognizes who you were anymore. Comment below, I'm not the same anymore. If any part of this story resonated with something you never had the courage to say out loud. It's been weeks, or maybe months, since I returned from the motel. If I can even use the word returned, because honestly, I'm not sure if I was the one who left. My days now pass with the clarity of a fogged-up window. Everything around me remains the same, familiar, but as if it had been remade in low resolution. The sunlight bothers me. Everyday sounds seem amplified, and every now and then, while doing simple things like brushing my teeth or climbing the stairs, I notice a slight delay between what I want to do and what my body actually does. At first I thought it was stress, an echo of the trauma, but the frequency of these lapses has increased. Small decisions that slip by seconds, as if another part of me had already taken over. Sometimes I open a closet and don't know what I'm looking for. Other times, I write words that don't belong to me. I find notes in strange places in my handwriting, but with phrases I don't remember thinking, as if there were 2 systems operating in the same body, one in front, the other waiting. The dreams are even worse. The mirror appears every night, invariably, always him, but now it's different. Now I'm no longer the observer. In dreams, I'm part of the reflection. I look out of the frame and see the room. That room, empty. But I feel someone is about to enter, always about to enter. The anticipation consumes me, because in dreams, I know the one who will enter is me. And every night I wake up seconds before the encounter happens. I've been avoiding reflective surfaces, turned off screens, display windows, rear-view mirrors. But even with all the precautions, you can't avoid it all the time. And it was during one of those distractions that it happened again. I was on the bus, returning from work. It was late afternoon, and the glass beside me softly reflected the row of seats. It was only for an instant, a blink, but the reflection beside me didn't move when I turned my face. It looked at me. It looked straight at me and smiled. A smile so brief, so precise, that it left me frozen for hours. I started to distrust everything, the people around me, my own reflection in video calls. In one of them, during a work meeting, I noticed that my image continued smiling a second after my expression had already changed. A friend commented in the chat, "What a strange smile you had just now." I closed the camera. I never came back. Sometimes I find myself making movements I don't remember learning, using expressions that were never mine, gesturing in ways that don't match my personality. Recently, I dropped a glass on the floor. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, and before I could even think to duck, my hands were already picking up the shards, as if someone inside me was anticipating my actions. And this happens with increasing frequency. I feel hollowed out, as if the essence that once inhabited me is being replaced by a more efficient, more restrained, more predictable version. I smile when I'm expected to. I respond properly. I follow the right gestures, even when I'm a wreck inside. And this, for a while, gave me the false sense that perhaps I was finally better. But the truth is, Control is gone. All that remains is performance. The voices have returned, not from outside, but within me. Now they don't whisper. They suggest small instructions, a phrase here, a phrase there. Turn left. Don't say that. Keep your gaze steady. And if I hesitate, I feel a pressure, as if my own body is correcting me, as if the host is irritated by my resistance. The other day, I walked into a convenience store. The reflection of the automatic door showed me arriving a fraction late, but this time he didn't follow my lead. He just watched me, with a neutral, almost bored expression, like someone waiting for the other person, me, to make a mistake. And that's exactly what haunts me most. The feeling that there's a me, watching, calculating, waiting for the right moment to take something I haven't yet fully surrendered, as if it were a last piece of me he couldn't capture, a trace of originality, a memory, a fear, a thread of conscience, and he needs me to let my guard down. These past few days I've been avoiding the bathroom mirror, but every night it's clean, shiny, as if someone wiped it, as if it were always ready for a reunion. My body also wakes up looking tidy, combed, with clothes folded on the chair, things I don't remember doing. Sometimes there's a second pillow used. Is someone sleeping next to me? Or was it me who slept on both sides of the bed? I'm no longer sure of anything. The line between reality and delirium blurred long ago, and the scariest thing is that I don't feel alone. I've never felt alone again. There's always a shadow behind every thought, a movement behind every gesture, a weight behind every breath, as if something were taking up space inside me, without asking permission, but also without haste. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because true transformation isn't always visible. Sometimes it happens behind the scenes of the mind, silent, subtle, masked by routine. And the most uncomfortable truth of all is this: perhaps what I called a reflex was all along the real version, waiting for me to fail. Comment here. I also feel someone inside me. If at some point in your life you had the strange certainty that something or someone lives within you. There are days when everything seems to be in order. I wake up at the same time, brush my teeth, drink coffee, walk the same streets. I talk to the same people. I reply to messages, smile, greet the doorman, resolve pending issues, make calls. From the outside, everything seems to be working. My body reacts, my face expresses itself, my speech obeys, but inside there's a fracture no one sees. It's like living behind a thin curtain. You can see the world, but everything is a little blurry, out of reach. What once felt natural, touch, words, silence, now carries a slight strangeness, as if your actions have been rehearsed by someone who knows you too well, someone who doesn't need to dominate your mind, just imitate. Sometimes I feel like I'm watching my own life as if it were a movie. Predictable reactions, repetitive lines, a non-existent soundtrack. But there's something behind the scenes, a presence behind the scenes, as if it's all been staged for appearances, so I don't realize I'm not who I used to be. I'm not sure when I stopped being original. Maybe it was when I started doubting the little things. Or maybe it was when I accepted that part of me no longer belonged to me. And what remained was this functional self, efficient, adaptable, a walking reflection that repeats exactly what's expected, even without knowing why. Today, when I look in the mirror, I no longer see an enemy. I see an empty mirror, neutral, as if whatever was there had already left. As if that consciousness that haunted me for so long had finally completed the process. And now, it was just me. The problem is, if it completed the transition, then what am I now? Perhaps this is the cruelest part of replacement. Not the loss of the body, not even the loss of identity, but the illusion of continuity. The feeling that I'm still me, but with details out of place. That I'm still the same, even though I've become someone else. In these moments of absolute silence, I begin to wonder if all this isn't part of a larger pattern. If I'm not alone, if there are others, people who, like me, are also experiencing this slow dissolution. who also wake up every day with the feeling of being lived by another consciousness, one that learns, copies, adapts, and occupies, without violence, without fanfare, simply with constancy. I've caught myself watching strangers on the street, trying to notice delays in their movements, smiles that don't touch the eyes, expressions that linger too long. And I wonder, do they know too? Do they also distrust their own gestures? Or did they, at some point along the way, accept, surrender? And surrender is truly the final step. So is there still a way back? But then comes the detail that haunts me most of all. The idea that perhaps this thing, this reflection, this copy, this entity isn't an external force. What if you've always been here? What if you've always been a part of us, just waiting for the right conditions to emerge? A sleep deprivation, a break in routine, a lingering glance in the mirror, a moment of extreme fatigue, an emotional absence, a moment of vulnerability, and then it presents itself, it insinuates itself, it settles in and convinces you little by little that it's more you than you are. I have no answers left. All that's left are questions that circle around and around, questions that echo like whispers inside an old mirror in a room that may never have existed outside my mind. But at the same time, if it wasn't real, why are the marks still on my body? Why does my reflection still watch me when I think no one is looking? Which brings me to the question that perhaps you also have, even if you've never put it into words. Are we really who we think we are, or just reflections of something we don't understand? Write in the comments, I'm with you until the end. If this story stirred something that was dormant inside you, and that is now starting to move. And if you've made it this far, perhaps you felt this story touch something that was already there, inside you, half hidden, half forgotten. Sometimes we need to put into words what no one else has ever had the courage to say. And if this video made you think, rethink, or simply feel, leave a "I'm with you until the end" in the comments. It's the simplest way for me to know this connection truly happened. If this kind of content makes you feel good, provokes you, or silently accompanies you, subscribe to the channel. That's what keeps it all alive and includes you in this space where reality isn't always what it seems. Oh, and if this video resonated with you, please leave a like. It's not just about numbers. It helps this story reach those who might need to hear something like this today.